I just don't see a way for your dad to make it work in 1990, but it would have been interesting to think, what if Memphis, World Class, and the AWA all came together? I guess as the story goes, he was trying to package this together at the NAPTI convention in January of 1990. And, he didn't ever really get any real momentum. Speaking of momentum, around 1991, your dad relayed the message from WCW about them wanting to sign you, or had they? I don't think they'd reached out to you directly. They reached out to him, and then he sort of shut it down.
Yep.
Like,
and did I? And I think I covered this, but maybe we didn't because I recalled it after we did the episode. What year, or you may not, it doesn't really matter. When did Crockett move to Dallas? Anyway, Crockett.
87.
Oh, was it that early? Okay. Crockett came by one of the Sportatorium tapings. And then that was the first kind of that I found out later. Hey, would Jeff be interested? Just kind of a general conversation. And then Dusty, it kind of kept going through the years and stuff like that. I have thought, and I think your question is, what happens if I would have gone? Is that your question, Conrad? Yeah.
Well, I was getting there. Like, in this alternate universe, if you would have went to WCW, and we'll call it 1991.
Yeah.
Because I know that Crockett, I believe he moved to Dallas after the failure of, I know he acquired Bill Watts, and he tried to have like a super show, if you will, for Starrcade 87. So he moved it out of Greensboro, moved it to Chicago, had the wrestling network, TWN. So I feel like that's the era where he took over the expensive Dallas office that was a rental that Watts had. So if he popped by the Sportatorium, it may have been 88, but I was under the impression that it was like 91 when someone from WCW, not Jim Crockett Promotions, but 1991, you had an opportunity with WCW. Am I off on that?
I think it's 91. I may be wrong, but you're correct. But what I found out is that it went back that far. So whenever we went to Dallas, and so look, maybe it wasn't when he was out there, but I know Crockett stopped by. Maybe he had already been gone, but he stopped by and just was casual conversation. Obviously, I found about all this later, but no, I don't want to say it the hard sell, but the offer and, hey, we'd like to have Jeff, come on board, and it's about time, and he's, not making.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to give you some context. Jim Crockett was under the assumption when he sold Jim Crockett Jr., when he sold to Turner, he was under the impression he's going to sell, and then he's still going to run wrestling for Turner. He's going to get a check, but now it's Ted's gimmick, and he's going to get a job. He's very quickly told that is not going to be the case. Jim Hurd's going to come in. Allegedly, Jim Crockett Jr. had a bit of a meltdown, felt like Dusty and Magnum and guys like that didn't stand up for him. And so he had, as the terms of his sale, like a non-compete. And I believe that ran through like 1993. So around 1993 is when he would have been trying to run. And we started to see he was doing stuff in Dallas and certainly in Philadelphia at the old ECW arena. He's at least interested in doing some stuff. And I would imagine that once he's out of WCW, because he's got this non-compete and he's sold and he's living in Dallas running his ice cream business, that he may have during that time swung through the Sportatorium just to see, is there anybody here I can pick up once my non-compete is up? Because I know he did some tapings and such. So I think, I'm not trying to jump in, but I'm saying I think that visit would have happened once he was on the outs with WCW, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Yeah. Wow. He had a long non-compete for damn sure. But it was, I know Crockett because my dad told me that. And look, maybe he was fibbing. I don't know. But then the Dusty thing was for sure. And look, Dustin came to work for my father, and then he went on. And because that was a part of the conversation, hey, man, I got Dustin down here, and we've got a bunch of young guys. And there was, Steiner had come into the territory. He had gone over. There was quite a few guys that had come through Austin. I don't know. There was several guys that I'm thinking, damn, all these guys just came through here, and now they're making. And I remember they started Turner money started at 156, $3,000 a week, and that was a hell of a lot more than I was making running up and down Tennessee and Texas roads. So, you know, if I would have gone there, my career, I'd honestly say it wouldn't have been near as long. I don't.
I do want to ask about that, the longevity, but I also want to ask about where you think you would have been slated. And I know this is all just hypothetical and we're just freestyling here. But if you would have went to a WCW in 1991, that's around the same time that Brian Pillman is really turning a lot of heads with Jushin Liger. And Brian Pillman was billed as being 5'11", 227. You were billed as being 6 feet, 235. So an inch taller, 8 pounds heavier. Said differently, do you think Dusty or perhaps Bill Watts would have seen you or positioned you as a light heavyweight? Not necessarily the cruiserweights that would happen on Nitro, but I'm saying guys like Brad Armstrong were lumped in there. And when I think about your style and your look and feel and all that, it feels like you and Brian Pillman and Brad Armstrong, I could see that as a group, but is it really that different? Because I don't know how much heavier Sting was. What was he, 15 pounds? But that somehow felt different than to a guy like Dusty or Bill Watts. And again, we're not talking about present the way we all view wrestling today. We're saying back then, do you think you would have been brought in and maybe positioned before you added some mass that you did in the WWF as a cruiserweight, not a cruiserweight, a light heavyweight is what they called it at the time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've never been so much, and you tell from my history, X Division and watching Bill Dundee, who's, you know, look, I don't think height and weight really determines the box office attraction. I go back to Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard, and look, either you're entertaining or not, or you got charisma or not, or you can talk or not. So I always kind of looked at that. But that being said, there's no doubt in my mind I would have come in as a underneath or a mid-card baby face that I would have organically had to claw my way up the ladder. And that comes with political, you think about the baby faces, remove the tip top Sting and maybe Garvin and maybe a few others, we could get out rosters, but I'll call it that young group that had super ability, but and I don't want to say it was rudderless, but there was no real vision behind. Hell, they didn't even think character. It was a talent. It was a heel or a babyface, that you didn't look at as Vince did, is let me create this character of a sports entertainer. And I say that, you could say, let me create this character of a professional wrestler. But no, I would have been slotted just like, there was, off the top of my head, I'm just trying to think, Mark Marrow, Steve Austin. And look, Steve's a bigger guy, but Steve went the heel, he became a heel. And there's Eric Watts, Dustin Rhodes, Mark Marrow, you said Brad Armstrong. There's a lot of guys that kind of came, but they had, runs and then they fell off, and then runs and they fell off. So there wasn't any sustained. And look, they turned over leadership how many times in that corporate environment, just in the time frame I'm talking about, 2 or 3 times, it feels like, the booking committee. And yeah, it was definitely a different era.
Jacob Simmel, and I'm from Bulls Gap, Tennessee. I was looking for a house, and Jason, when I talked to him, it seemed like he knew a lot about what he was talking about, and he was a big help with anything I ever needed. It was my first time buying a house, so I didn't know what I was getting into. It was a good experience. I closed actually a week earlier than planned. Anytime I needed help with anything or had any questions, he'd answer right away and help me learn a lot too. I would gladly recommend anybody. Y'all are a big help, and if I ever go to buy a house again, I'd go with y'all again. My name is Jacob Stimmel, and I got into my first home with the team at SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com.